"You're not young enough to be a soldier anymore, old man." Laughter echoed through the barracks at Fort Benning as Ray McAllister, a former Navy SEAL who had withdrawn from the battlefield more than a decade earlier, stepped into the reactivation training class. No one noticed the faded tattoo on his back, once the mark of those assigned missions that were never officially recorded. They only saw a salt and pepper-haired man, quiet and unassuming. What they didn't know was that he hadn't returned to learn. He had come back to test whether today's military was still worthy of what he had once sacrificed. "You're not young enough to be a soldier anymore, old man." Laughter rose from the group of young soldiers as Ray McAllister stepped down from the military vehicle at Fort Benning. In the reactivation formation, he was 49, the oldest man there, salt and pepper hair, steady but deliberate stride. On his shoulder hung a worn, frayed backpack. In his hands were shoes polished to an almost unnatural shine for a place full of mud. The glances cast at him carried everything: contempt, suspicion, a touch of pity. No one knew where he came from. His file was almost blank. There was only one directive from PACCOM: requalification before special deployment. Ray said nothing. He quietly set up his bunk, folded his blanket, cleaned his shoes, like a recruit obediently following procedure. But that silence made people uneasy. It wasn't shyness, it was the silence of someone who felt he didn't have to prove anything to anyone. On the first training session, he completed the physical test without heavy breathing. While many younger men were struggling, Ray ran with even cadence, eyes not seeking anyone, not competing. Only once, when a young soldier twisted his ankle and fell, did he pause, lift him up, and then keep running. Not a word. A young lieutenant named Kellen later half-jokingly asked, "You doing that to impress the instructors?" Ray didn't answer. But the training leader, a veteran Marine sergeant, gave him a subtle nod. That look wasn't for a newcomer. In the tactics class, when the instructor asked, "In conditions of level 5 gusting winds during a night insertion, which factor do you prioritize?" Ray replied immediately, "Reduce noise to under 40 decibels and avoid moonlight reflections on the water." The answer wasn't in the curriculum, but it was so precise that the instructor stared at him for a long moment. From then on, attention shifted. The mockery stopped, but no one dared get close either. Ray became a mystery among the young cohort. He didn't assimilate, nor did he isolate. He simply existed quietly, unmistakably different. The way he handled the paracord knife, the way he washed his hands after every shot, all betrayed someone who had lived in an environment where mistakes were not allowed. And then the question began to spread through the barracks. Who is he really? Do you dare guess who he truly is before the story moves into its next chapter?
Welcome to Veteran Best Stories, where the war ends, but the stories live on. From the foxholes to front porches, we honor the silent battles our veterans still fight. Subscribe and walk with us beyond the battlefield.
It wasn't loud things Ray did that made people notice him. It was the precision, the correctness, the quietness, like the way someone would clean a weapon without needing to look. The way someone folded a tourniquet with the wind so it could be opened easily in an emergency. Or simply, the way an old man like him could wake before reveille, silently walk the perimeter, checking every lock while the sky was still dark. In the second week, Ray was assigned to the logistics team, a position most of the younger soldiers considered boring, inventorying the armory, counting ammunition, cleaning rifles, inspecting first aid kits. But for Ray, every motion had purpose. And that was what caught Sergeant Blanton's attention, the armory chief. The first time Ray received an aged M4A1, he disassembled and reassembled it using only his index and middle fingers in under 15 seconds. Blanton said nothing. He quietly took off his watch and ran the same test in the dark. Ray still finished just as fast, without a flashlight. Not performance, just an old reflex that hadn't fallen away. Blanton began to call him by the name whispered in his head, the Shadow Man. That evening, the training unit ran a night infiltration drill in the woods south of the barracks. Temperature dropped. Rain came suddenly. While the team split into 3 assault elements, a young soldier got stuck between 2 muddy slopes, slipped, and twisted his ankle. Communications cut out. No one knew where he was. When the withdrawal order went out, everyone trudged back toward command. But Ray was not among them. No one saw him return. 17 minutes later, he emerged from the eastern trail, blanket over his shoulder, leading the young soldier shivering from the cold. No one asked where he had gone. No one ordered him back. Only a training officer recorded that Ray had followed the sunken footprint trail and returned against the wind direction, a move only someone who had survived enemy hunts in hostile territory would instinctively make. When he handed the blanket to the young soldier, he slipped an energy chew into his palm, a small gesture but enough to make people look at him differently. The next morning, a young lieutenant approached him, half skeptical, half respectful, and asked, "Why did you go back when everyone was already ordered to withdraw?" Ray looked at him, no harshness, no sermon, just replied tersely, "Leave no one behind." That answer made several nearby fall quiet, because they had heard that before, not in current military classrooms. It was a saying passed down in old SEAL team circles, those who operated off the books in the Middle East, where records were erased and survival was the only proof. From that day, murmurs began in the barracks. Some claimed Ray had been part of a rapid response unit in Fallujah. Others whispered he was tied to a Delta Force operation scrubbed from files. No one knew for sure. Ray didn't confirm, but his actions, always precise, always sufficient, made any speculation impossible to fully dismiss. In a subsequent exercise, the instructor called for close-quarters scenario work using a K-bar knife. Ray didn't waste movement. One draw, the blade flipped with a grip angle that only those with specialized special operations training would recognize. Other trainees murmured in awe. He did not react. He simply sheathed the knife and returned to position. A watching officer quietly stepped outside and immediately contacted his superior. "I think this man is not just a regular veteran. We need to verify the real reason he's here. Do you think he was sent to Fort Benning to learn? Or to assess who is training today's American soldiers? Can you guess what happens next?" Relax a bit, drop a comment with "1" or "I'm still here" to keep listening. The truth never shows up with a loud noise. It usually reveals itself from a quiet space, a small moment nobody pays attention to until it can no longer be ignored. That morning, after a grueling mud training session, the trainees were allowed into the communal shower to rinse off with cold water. Steam hung hazily over the mirrors, noise echoed, and here and there came the familiar grumbles. No one paid attention to Ray when he entered, carrying his own towel and an old, edge-worn gray bar of soap. He took off his shirt slowly. And in that exact moment, the shower room fell silent, as if someone had just sliced through the air with a knife. Across his back, a faded black tattoo spanned both shoulders, a trident intertwined with an anchor, encircled by a band of letters, SEAL Team 5, and beneath it, a line in Latin, Per Silentium, Periculum Vincimus. A young soldier dropped his shampoo bottle. Another whistled softly. That emblem wasn't in any textbook, but those who had ever skimmed the unofficial history of Navy Special Operations recognized it. It was the private mark of the Shadow Recon Group, a unit disbanded more than a decade earlier after a series of missions that were never officially confirmed. No one said anything. But the looks changed. It was no longer contempt. Not quite respect either. It was a silence, mixed with shock and caution. At the same time, in the command office of the reactivation site, Captain Evelyn Drake was reviewing the files of the special trainees. She was one of the few female commanders who had participated in deep-sea operations in the Pacific, and also the authority empowered to audit PACOM-stamped records. When she reached the name Ray McAllister, she paused. His file was nearly blank. No unit history, no training evaluations, not even a clear discharge date. Only a single directive. Transferred from classified facility verified by PACOM. Reason for deployment not to be disclosed. She pulled a chair back, opened the secure file drawer, and took out a yellowed stack of papers, an old roster of operations never entered into official logs. Ray's name appeared 3 times, each time with a different alias. But there was one common thread: the tattoo, same insignia. That afternoon, Ray was summoned to the main office. He entered on time, by regulation, his posture unchanged. Captain Drake studied him for a long moment, then invited him to sit. Ray remained standing, no resistance, no explanation. Between them was a particular silence, one that only existed between 2 people who had survived missions that nobody else could understand. Captain Drake didn't ask about the past. She simply laid out a photograph, a soldier with an SR-25 slung over his shoulder, wearing a diving mask, standing on the deck of the USS Providence amid the storm of 2009. The face was obscured, but the tattoo was unmistakable. Ray glanced at it, then nodded slightly. Captain Drake folded the photo, slid it into the drawer, said nothing more. She signed off on a brief order, reassigning him to the internal observer group, keeping his identity unpublicized, and allowing him to continue training as before. Outside, the trainees knew nothing of the meeting, but they began to keep their distance. No one joked anymore. No more snide remarks. That same night, a small group of young soldiers huddled around a phone, searching for shadow recon, but only encountered a red line notice: restricted, not classified for public access. Do you think someone like Ray was sent to Fort Benning to be reactivated? Or to observe the very people leading America's new generation of soldiers? There was no warning bell, no siren. Just one odd sound, dry, sharp, and out of place, that echoed from the CQC Urban Combat Training Compound on the final afternoon of the exercise. At first, everyone assumed it was part of the scripted simulation, until real smoke began to curl upward. It was a sweltering day, with strong gusts of west wind. In the drill, a team was practicing breach entry using a mock thermal charge. But one of the younger soldiers, too eager, too careless, accidentally triggered propane from a support device, detonating the prop room. Insulation materials caught fire, spreading faster than anyone had predicted. Shouts erupted. Black smoke poured through the ground floor windows, obscuring vision. Those nearby started to fall back. Instructors screamed evacuation orders. Trainees scrambled toward rally points, panicked, bottlenecking through narrow exits. Ray wasn't on the response roster that day. He was coordinating from the comm station 70 meters away. When he saw the smoke rising, he didn't run to ask for permission. He didn't check with anyone. He pulled an old gas mask from his personal pack, ripped his outer shirt to wrap around his hands, and charged into the side entrance that was already heating up. Inside, the crackling roar of burning plastic reverberated. The wind had shifted, forcing waves of thick, choking smoke back into the room. He dropped low, feeling along the wall with his knee, avoiding flames while using a flashlight to locate the gas accumulation points. He found 2 young soldiers in a rear chamber, panicked, one unconscious, the other coughing violently beside a dummy rifle. Neither had been able to extract themselves. The smoke had blunted their responses. Ray wrapped fabric around their mouths, stabilized their heads, then with bare hands, pried open the glass door's safety bar. Each movement was decisive, without hesitation. He hoisted the unconscious soldier onto his shoulder and hauled the other by a pre-tied rescue rope secured around his waist. With no clear exit, he chose a ventilation shaft tight, low, and blistering hot, and began to pull them out. Outside, the entire training camp stood still, watching from a distance. No one knew exactly who had gone in. But when a figure emerged through the haze, sleeves shredded, face blackened, they began to recognize. Ray stepped out without a sound of pain. The unconscious young soldier remained safely cradled on his shoulder. The others staggered behind, hacking, eyes still dazed. A medic rushed to take them. Ray simply sat down on the ground, leaned against the concrete wall, and slowed his breath. A dark burn streak ran from his wrist up his left bicep, but Ray didn't look down. His gaze was fixed on the burning building, not in mourning, but as if reconfirming something familiar: exit paths, smoke flow, wind direction. Captain Drake appeared a few minutes later. She said nothing. She stood beside him, quietly watching the medics work. No one brought up the tattoo from before. No one asked about what he had done in the past. But in that moment, everyone understood. He didn't need to be named. He had defined himself in the way only those who face death and returned can. Do you think this man came back just to learn, or to remind us what the word soldier truly means? Dear audience, grab a glass of water and stay with us. The story isn't over. The next twist is coming. Comment 1 if you're still here, and this story grabbed you, so we know you're watching. The next morning, there was no muster bell, no roll call. Just one message passed quietly. Ray McAllister was summoned to the command office. The small room glowed with pale yellow light from the old fluorescent fixture. On the desk lay a few files and a worn seal badge with its paint faded. Captain Evelyn Drake stood there, uniform, impeccable, her hand resting lightly on the folder without opening it. She didn't need to read further. She already knew. Ray entered, stood upright, said nothing. But the air in the room seemed to tighten, not because of what he brought in, but because of what he had left behind. Captain Drake did not sit. She stepped toward him, watched him silently for a few seconds, then spoke, just low enough that no one outside those walls could have heard. We trained together at Bud S. That year, you topped the 20-minute underwater swim test. Ray did not react. His eyes did not change, as if time no longer moved inside his chest. And then, Drake continued, you vanished from the system after the Yemen operation in 2010. No one knew why. I only heard that you withdrew yourself from the field. No permission asked. Nothing left behind. He remained silent, but his jaw tightened subtly, a reflex only those carrying too much remembrance show when there are no words to wrap it in. Captain Drake quietly stepped behind him. In a gesture rare in the military, not protocol, not an order, she placed her hand on the faded tattoo on his shoulder. This emblem isn't just for graduates, she said, her voice low. It's for those who survived, and who remember why they came back. The room was silent. The wall clock ticked, steady like a breathing exercise in a moment of panic. But between those ticks, something was being cleansed. Not guilt, but distance. The distance between survivors and a world that would never fully understand them. You didn't come here to relearn how to shoot, Drake went on. I know. You came here to see if there is anyone left worthy of wearing this uniform. Ray said nothing, but this time he gave a slight nod, not to confirm, but as a letting go of vigilance, of pain, and of a long life lived in quiet. A few minutes later, when he left the office, the barracks atmosphere had shifted. The young soldiers no longer looked at him with hesitation or curiosity. They saluted him, not because of rank, but because they felt something that couldn't be translated into an order, yet weighed like responsibility, that among them stood someone who had once held the line so they could live in peace. That night, in a quiet corner of the dining hall, one of the two soldiers Ray had pulled from the fire approached. He didn't say thank you. He just sat across from him and placed on the table a neatly folded letter his mother's, sent before training began. In the letter was one line: "If you meet someone wearing the seal tattoo, listen to them. They once stayed silent to protect things you've never seen." Ray read it, folded it back, and returned it to him. He kept nothing. He only looked at him, a look gentle, yet deep, as if he understood him more than the soldier understood himself. So after all of it, will Ray choose to stay? Or will he leave again, like before, when nothing had yet given him a name? There are silences that don't make people forget, they make them remember forever. And in the days that followed at Fort Benning, that same silence spread like ink soaked deep into an old letter. The news that Ray McAllister had run into the fire to save his teammates didn't come from the press. It didn't go through the official military bulletin. It traveled mouth to ear, soldier to soldier, with no need for embellishment. Only what they had seen with their own eyes. A man stepping out of the blaze, without waiting for anyone to call his name. Those who had once mocked him, the passing jabs in the shower, the snide remarks on the training field, the exhaustion-fueled scoffs, were now quiet. Not because they'd been reprimanded, because they felt ashamed. And from that shame, something else began to grow: respect. No one apologized to him in words, but they started to get closer. A young soldier asked him how to wrap a trauma kit so it could be accessed with one hand. Another quietly set a K-bar knife on the table and sat watching Ray disassemble and reassemble every joint. Some mornings, before Ray was even awake, someone had already folded his blanket for him. When he went out to the field, his water bottle was always cold. Someone had placed it in the cooler ahead of time. No one claimed credit. But Ray understood. Then there was the paper. One evening, he returned to his bunk after training and found a folded note on his pillow. The handwriting was raw, messy but legible. "You once said, 'Leave no one behind. Thank you for not leaving me.'" No name. But he didn't need to know who wrote it. On another night, a group of young trainees organized a voluntary night drill. No orders. They just wanted Ray to teach them how to read wind sounds, distinguish the smell of smoke. No one spoke of titles. No one mentioned the tattoo. Simply, how not to fail, how not to leave anyone behind. Captain Drake watched it all quietly. She didn't interfere. She just reported up the chain. McAllister has completed the internal evaluation phase. Recommend retention under special status. Do not publicize. A small line in a file, but enough to alter the course of a life. The next morning, during the flag ceremony, something happened that had never happened before. When it was Ray's turn, a young trainee stepped out of formation, approached him, said nothing, and simply offered both hands the gesture of requesting permission to adjust his firing stance. Ray complied. And then the others followed. No one forced them. There was no order. But one by one, they stepped forward. They didn't need another lecture. They needed someone to look at. As the national anthem played, many noticed. For the first time, Ray placed his hand over his heart. Not because of the song. Because he had seen something he had spent his life doubting, that young people, if led the right way, could still hold the oath to leave no one behind. But will he stay to lead them? Or vanish again the way he once did, leaving only his silhouette and legend? Some who return don't seek welcome. They are quiet, like the shadows they once passed through. But a timely action, a hand extended, a word spoken without being taught, can awaken humanity in a new generation. Ray McAllister didn't need medals. He just needed to know that someone would keep the oath leave no one behind. If you've made it this far, then somewhere inside you felt overlooked too. But don't forget, some values don't need anyone's validation. If you keep living by them, others will see. Thank you for following this story. If you've ever met a Ray in your life, please share it in the comments below. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that they still matter. And if you believe America still needs people like Ray, hit follow. We'll keep telling the rest.